Welcome back, Tribe. I have a section here of why everyone gave up on dating, specifically the red pill and what it's doing to marriage. Let's see.
A lot of their productions and stuff. He said what the red pill is doing to marriage, basically sort of degrading marriage, saying that it's a bad deal for men, etc., etc. You've looked at a good chunk of this, right? What's happening with marriage and divorces? Like, what are the real stats that people are missing here?
Sure. So, yeah, as far as the red pill goes, it's, promotes a lot of very cynical narratives, particularly in the context of marriage. And it's, not a homogenous ideology or set of beliefs or whatever. You do see a lot of discourse on divorce that often just says, 50 or 60% of people get divorced. It's mostly initiated by women. Okay, but there are individual differences in who gets divorced and who doesn't. For every married man across the board, and I think this is something that gets wrong, the risk of getting divorced is not 50%. That's going to be determined a great deal by the individual characteristics within that relationship. What kind of things contribute to divorce? Infidelity is a big one. Alcohol abuse is a big one. Economic problems. So just by avoiding, simple things that are going to cause a divorce flat out.
Don't cheat, don't drink, don't get broke.
Exactly. Yeah. Just these very basic things is going to drop the divorce rate way down. If you look across demographic groups, individuals with a higher level of education, men and women both, much less likely to be single, much less likely to get divorced. So already being within these certain demographic groups drops it way down. But you do kind of have that narrative out there in the red pill and all of that, marriage is a bad deal for men. And they hear many anecdotes about people who get divorced and they lose all of their things or whatever. And yeah.
Yeah. Jeremy Boring tweeted, the fact that women initiate 80% of divorce is evidence that some manifestations of evil are more common in women, something society, and frustratingly Christian society, has been trying to obscure since we turned over all of our moral authority to women in the 20th century. That seems like a very, very odd claim to make, that there's manifestations of evil. That's not for me to say that women initiating divorce, that there's some perverse incentives that could be going on there. There's all manner of reasons why this sort of thing could happen. Many of them are probably pretty unspeakable. Evidence that some manifestations of evil are more common in women. Why do women initiate more divorces, and what are the reasons that they give for that?
Sure.
The real reason is most people shouldn't even be in a relationship today, let alone a marriage. Let's be honest about values, morals, character. All that stuff is missing in the world today, both for men and women, but I'll just specifically speak on women. We have an insane society today that pushes hypersexuality, commodifying your body, absolutely not coming to the table, meeting halfway, and compromising with your partner in any way whatsoever. So it's my body, my choice. It's I'm a strong, independent boss, babe. Don't need no man. What are men good for? Yada, yada, yada. The patriarchy, we're being held down by men. It's very adversarial. It's almost like being with a man is somehow disadvantageous unless you can get something out of him, unless you could extract some kind of resource from him. Everything else is you being held down. All men are good for is walking wallets. That's the message that's being propagated today. On top of that, they're not the women their grandmothers were. They don't cook, they don't clean, they don't support their man's dreams, they don't try to build a happy home, they don't work together for a legacy that helps her by helping her man. It's not seen that way. It's I want to work, I want to get it on my own. My money's my money anyways, and your money is our money. It's very selfish. It's not selfless like it used to be. So men are asking the question, well, why should I marry now if you're a quarter of the woman your grandmother was? Quote, hoflation. That's what we call it today. But that doesn't even include the marriage laws and the court biases that are for women. So you get divorced, you lose most of your stuff as a man. She has an insane advantage when it comes to keeping the kids. You're going to be left damn near destitute. And if you don't manage to make those payments, you will end up in prison. So the court system tells us that this entire institution is set up to protect the family, to protect the children. How do you protect the children by jailing a man who can't afford to make the payments because he's already lost everything? He most likely is dealing with insane mental stress. He's teetering and on the verge of losing it. He may be turning to alcohol or other drugs just to cope with losing his entire family. So the man may probably perform less at work and eventually lose his job, get fired, or simply not earn as much. Then he gets sent to prison. They're not anecdotes. This is what will happen to you if your marriage goes sideways. This is not one story we hear from Bob over there and how he got screwed over. This is what awaits you when a marriage fails in the West under the court systems we have today. which incentivizes women to leave because they get away with having your stuff. Then they get deals from the government. They get to play daddy with the feds, and you get pushed out of the home. And there's no social stigma anymore too. You're a strong boss babe, single mothers. Yeah. So when you teach a certain gender, don't expect to compromise. If anything gets hard, bail, because daddy government will be there to help you. What's the incentive in staying and working on a relationship? If it's not a Disney rainbow dream where everything's perfect, happily ever after, I'll leave. So why would they stay? Why would anybody stay? That is why the divorce rate is 80%. Now we can get back to a conversation of quality relationships. For example, two partners that tend to be higher educated, just higher general intelligence, period. Better family backgrounds, because most people that go on to higher education like that tend to come from more stable households in general. So when you factor in, this is why I say I wonder what the variables are. I've said it plenty of times in other videos of couples that come together in a marriage that have these characteristics versus Bob and Jane that come from broken homes that are like minimum wage workers or barely scraping by, have a ton of childhood trauma they haven't dealt with, poverty, you name it, a whole bunch of things going wrong in their own lives, and they come together out of convenience. Most people are getting married today out of convenience, not because they're right for each other. And out of this convenience, a ton of problems start arising. And so these marriages don't last. I would guess that a ton of people are unfortunately in relationships that they should have never been in. Marriages, that they should have never been in the first place. You're only with your spouse because it's convenient. You've been wanting to leave for years, but you don't know how to break the news. You're scared of changing up the normal. You don't want to step out into the world and date again because you're afraid it might be worse than what you currently have, which is already bad. There are tons of people that have lived through these kinds of marriages where they just stay. Now, if you have kids, I understand that complicates everything, and then everything is shifted to, we're doing this for the kids now. We have to just swallow it and try to make peace with one another for the children. But there's a lot of couples here that get into these, quote, marriages, and they'll divorce like 2 years later, 3 years later, 6 years later, no kids. Most of these people that are divorcing have no kids. And these marriages are very short-lived. So are they inflating the statistics? Yeah, I bet, man. When you see what some of these divorced people look like, and if you could sit down and ask them about their lives, their beliefs, their values, their character, and you get to interview both, and then they tell you they divorced, you probably wouldn't be shocked. You wouldn't be surprised. There's a ton of marriages out there that are probably following this exact script. Dude was inexperienced with women, worked hard to get a decent paying job. Some chick comes along that probably had her fun, settles down for the nice guy because she's matured. She's changed her mind on chasing all these assholes that just use her. And then they get into this relationship where it was never bound to succeed because there's no real genuine attraction there. He's too inexperienced to even pick out the correct woman for himself. She is too damaged from dating guys far above her social status and not being able to retain either. And they're both coming together convenient. He gets access to sex and a woman, finally. She gets access to a stable little wallet, finally. But neither are really happy. And then you end up with, boom, she divorces him I don't know how many years later. Man, that one's really common. So if we were to really break down the statistics and you were able to question people on all these little variables, you would see that most people today do not qualify for a relationship, let alone a marriage. And I'll say that too based on this. Look at how we consider adults today compared to, say, grandparents. Like the mental development of a 21-year-old today versus the mental development of a 21-year-old in 1940 or 1910. By 21, for generations prior, you were already a full-blown adult with responsibilities and getting your life in order. A 21-year-old today acts like a child, and you expect these grown children to be in a serious marriage and to make the correct assessment of their partners. These people cry that their avocado toast isn't toasty enough. They barely have the basics of adulting down, and you're ready for this next step in life. On top of that, adding kids. Come on, man. The infantilization of society today in general, both men and women, into later adulthood is also causing a bunch of these problems. We treat our adults like children. It's kind of wild when you think about it.
So, yeah, there's a lot of focus on that. That's kind of the narrative, isn't it? That women initiate more divorces, and that kind of puts the onus on women like, oh, if you initiate the divorce, it's your fault. But there's a lot of different reasons. Actually, the reasons why women initiate divorce is a very complex topic. So I'll kind of go through some of these. But because someone initiates a divorce does not mean that they are at fault for the divorce, right? So we do see, for example, men and women both, men also will admit this, when they get divorced, I cheated at a rate about twice that of women. They're much more likely to be physically abusive, although some recent research has called that into question as well, that perhaps domestic violence within relationships is actually pretty similar for men and women. Men are more likely simply to stay in relationships when the relationship is bad. And if they do kind of want out, they're just simply less likely to ask for the divorce. We know over time, over long periods of time, relationship satisfaction for women, it declines faster as well. So there's a lot of reasons why women initiate divorces, but that doesn't necessarily mean that women destroyed the relationship, right? A lot of the time, those initiations of divorce can be responses. There's also a lot of narrative, for example, that women get a lot out of divorce. That doesn't seem to be the case when looking at alimony, child support, and all of these things. It's usually the case that women enter a state of poverty and stay below the poverty line for a few years following divorce, and that men tend to remain more financially successful following their divorces as well. And there's very high agreement in divorced couples as well on why the divorce happened. Both couples tend to indicate that, we grew apart is simply one of the large reasons. Most divorces as well, if they look at like who initiated it, they often ask whose idea was this or who brought it up first. But if you ask, like, did you both want the divorce? You see really high agreement there that both of them are like, yeah, the relationship was over. So that's also something to consider. Seems to be rarely the case that it's simply a unilateral thing. The relationship at that point has deteriorated. Both people know it. She might ask for it first, and that might emerge in the statistics as the woman, initiating the divorce. But it's really rarely the case that the man is just like chilling and he thinks everything is perfect and everything's going well. And then she says, I want a divorce. And he's just blindsided. I don't know why that happened. And then she takes everything. That's very, very rare that happens.
Yeah, Adam Lane Smith, psychotherapist, ex-psychotherapist, now relationship coach, he's sat through thousands of couples across his career. And he's adamant about this, that couple comes in and sits down and something catastrophic is about to happen. And to the guy, he hasn't, it's either willful ignorance or just straight up blindness to many, many, many signs for years and years and years from his partner. And, Adams is, he's fucking pro men for an awful lot of this. I don't think that he's got any reason to simp for women's desire to have no fault divorce or whatever. I think that he's been truthful when he just says, look, guys can get into a habit that keeps them blind to what's going on in their relationship. And the female partner gets to the stage where they say, there's no more, there are no more hints that I can drop. We need to go to counseling. And then they sit down in counseling and this woman kind of unloads all of this stuff. And the guy looks across and can't believe what is coming out of his partner's mouth. And yeah, I think it's Adam seemed to think that a lot of the time couples counseling is done by a couple as almost an excuse by the woman so that she doesn't feel too guilty. Like she's already made her mind up and it's already so far gone. She needs to finally be able to actually get all of this stuff off her chest. So, you could maybe say that this is a communication problem. Maybe it's a failure of cross-sex mind reading between the sexes, that women are communicating their discontent and their issues in ways that men aren't picking up on, that men aren't being sufficiently perceptive. Like those would be some ways. But we understand that women file for divorce more than men. Why do you think that that's the case? Like, what is it about women or their experience within a marriage that's causing that to be them that does it?
Well, I think there's a situation where men will simply stay in a bad relationship almost to the end. Men are much less likely to kind of end it when all of the writing is on the wall. There are very explicit things that cause divorce, as well. Drug abuse, more common in men. Infidelity, more common in men. And just looking at those two things, that already closes the gap to who initiates. But then we have other things as well, like declining marital satisfaction, which does decline faster in women. I think women are more willing to move on in that sense, perhaps. I think, we know, for example, that in single women, they're much more likely to report being voluntarily single. Women are probably more okay than men in many ways, as far as leaving a relationship and as far as not being in a relationship that they don't want, which can go back to, all of the evolutionary reasons, women being more selective and that sort of a thing. Women seem to be less pressured to remain in a relationship when they're genuinely unhappy with it, more ready to move on.
Options.
Is that because ancestrally women would have had a surplus of potential suitors. So for men, it makes sense for them to remain steadfast and robust even in their shitty relationship, because the relationship may not be that good, but at least it's a relationship. You know, most of my male friends, they haven't got anybody.
Well, I don't know about that for sure, because sometimes we see those bottlenecks in the Y chromosome, which indicates, okay, there were actually many more women than to men. So it's almost like if they left the man, would they be able to find another one? I don't know for sure about that. But something that seems to be very consistent across humans is we have the dominant mating pattern is basically serial monogamy, that people, unlike the prairie vole or some other animal, we don't tend to mate for life or with our first sexual partner and stay with them forever. People have some girlfriends, they break up, they get married, they might stay married 10 or 15 years, they get a divorce, they marry someone else. So people have an orientation toward monogamy that's much stronger than many of the other apes, right? And we form really long relationships compared to most mammals, but they don't seem to be lifelong relationships. And that seems to correspond to kind of the gestational age, I guess, or the developmental age of children, that there is a period of time when people might need to stay together to ensure the survival of offspring. It could be also the case as well that, not having lifelong bonding can increase genetic fitness from genetic diversity. So if someone, has a long-term relationship, 15 years, they have some offspring, they get to the end of that time period, they divorce, they might still have some time to have new offspring with a new mate. So we still have this long-term mate formation, but kind of with some diversity of offspring in that case.
How do you think we should balance the scales? That if what you say is right, and I believe that you are right as well, I don't think that Christopher Ryan's Sex at Dawn is perfectly accurate. Serial monogamy seems to be what makes sense, ancestral, monogamish, I think it's sometimes referred to as. But we've created a cultural world where that is looked at. Jeremy Boring is probably a pretty good example of what the last 500 years of marital advice has been, that you're supposed to stay together through thick and thin, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. We have constructed a value system, even outside of, people that are super Christian, that, breakups and divorce and stuff, it's not something that you're supposed to do. You made your commitment to the partner and you're going to stick together forever. Do you ever think about this?
Yeah, it's religious. It's the Abrahamic religions. It's how we've constructed the moral scaffold of the world that we live in today, and it's helped us advance in the way it has because it's stabilized family. But even before that, and you don't even need Abrahamic religions, by the way, if you look to the Asian world where they're not religious like that, they have similar frameworks of the man and woman coming together and staying together for life. The notion that women are just far more likely to leave, and where he said earlier that he doesn't know if necessarily there would be more men available, he's forgetting the part where men with good resource acquisition, the high value men, typically had multiple women. So a woman could leave her partner that was average or performing below what was required, could share a man and do better with the shared high value male that's imparting multiple resources to multiple women because he's just that much better at resource acquisition. Concubines and mistresses have been a thing for a long time. It was actually pretty normal, if we're looking at thousands of years ago. So that explains how a select few of men were always the ones winning, genetically speaking, when it came to reproduction, and why most men, like the bottom 40% or so, just lose. They don't reproduce. And due to the access in mates today, the paradox of choice, think the interconnectivity of technology, social media, dating apps, all that stuff, women are now able to exert their natural biological needs of finding out the highest quality mate, getting access to him, and completely sidestepping average men. This is why you see the world today has become like a 95-5 rule. It's no longer 80-20 or 60-40. It's becoming tipped in the favor of men who are able to acquire resources at a hyper-competitive scale, where one man, wherever he is in the rest of the world, can pluck out multiple women, bring them over with a plane flight, all under his wing with very minimal effort. So yes, there's a lot of women today that are choosing to share these men instead of wasting their time with an average man, because the life the rich guy gives her as a concubine will be on the same level as the quote average nice guy that would settle for her. Because that rich guy will buy you a little house, will buy you a little car, will get you nice expensive things. To him, that costs nothing. But that other nice guy that would give you quote loyalty and all that stuff, that's not worth as much to see your kids struggling, to barely afford to make house payments. That is a lose situation in a woman's mind. She would rather share loyalties irrelevant. It's resource allocation for her children, first and foremost. This is why women pick for resources. It's not just resources for herself. She's thinking instinctually, well, how can I put my kids in the best position in life? Well, if that means I have to share this high value man and I get access to great genetics, and on top of that, he'll take care of me. Sure, I'm just another concubine or a mistress, but I still get to have either the same or better lifestyle than this poor average man here who has to work himself to the bone to provide me about the same life. Then yes, I rather go with high tier genetics and similar incomes. And that's just a brutal truth about nature. Again, flip that on its head. You become a man of high status, high income earning, high value. You tend to see men in those circles start to acquire a concubine of women. And it's not seen as anything weird. Like society overall goes, oh, this guy's really handsome. Oh, this guy's like an athlete, a singer. He has some sort of notoriety, politician, a king, something. Oh yeah, it's expected that he has concubines. It's expected that he has like mistresses all over the place. It doesn't even sound weird to anybody to bring up a high status man having multiple women. It's accepted. What's not accepted is a low status male having multiple women. What do you mean? You're low stat. You can hardly feed yourself. You want multiple women on top of that? Work on affording one woman. And that's how society looks at it. That's why society shames low status males that tried to have too many women. But they'll never shame the high status male that has a bunch of women. It's crazy how women will just flock to that guy consistently over and over again because he's high status. Pays to be the king.
Cultural mismatch to our sort of evolutionary predisposition?
Yeah, definitely. Certainly we have, the last 2,000 years of rules that say you are married to someone, you stay with them for life. And at the same time, yeah, we have that mismatch between that and what people seem to want to do. And looking at research on love, for example, there's different kind of stages of love or different components of love. One is called passionate or romantic love. And that seems to be the feeling, neurobiological, that people experience when they say they're in love. And that usually doesn't.
And again, that's a new concept too. This is the Disney infection in people's minds. We used to not marry for love. That wasn't even a concept a few hundred years ago. We married for familial reasons, combining wealth of two families to better position ourselves socioeconomically. This whole marrying for love it's like a clown show, a very recent invention. Arranged marriages were the norm before. Arranged marriages mostly succeeded, like an overwhelming percent. I don't know what the divorce rate in India is, but from what I remember seeing, it was like a couple of percentage points. And they're heavily involved in arranged marriages still. 1%. India's divorce rate is at 1%. And it says divorce rate in India is low because familial stability and wellness of children is given preference over fleeting individual preferences. There you go. That's completely on its head to what we do here in the West. Okay? Remember, over fleeting individual preferences. So people are marrying for values of the family, social status of the family, putting the family first. It's not two individuals. It's the families combining. And they do this due diligence, by the way, that's far superior to the individuals. Like, a man and a woman coming together individually, they cannot assess properly because, the goggles of love are on. You see your partner as perfect. You're in love. You can't make proper decisions. You don't see red flags how you're supposed to. You'll do sunk cost fallacies on your relationship. You'll completely ruin your ability to accurately judge your partner. When you have two families, you as a man going into another family and her father, her uncles, her mother, everybody, the grandparents are all looking you up and down and actively saying, like, how much does he make? What's his values? How can they help our family? What part does he come from? How's his personality, characteristics, morals, yada, yada, yada. And they got an entire list that they're vetting you for. Likewise, your family's vetting her for the very same thing. Is this chick loose? Does she sleep around? Is she family oriented? Does her family have a stable relationship with her? Blah, blah, blah. Dude, there's a million things that they're all looking for one another. And then they go, we think they would be a good match. It's only after the due diligence is done by the families, do you come together and go, yeah, that'll be a good match, because they want you to succeed. And then there is pressure. There are social constructs that keep these people together, even if they feel like quitting because we're having a hard time. And there's no bailing because I feel like having a midlife crisis and I want to restart my life and see what's out there. No, there's none of that shit. That's shame on the family. There are social stigmas in place that discourage people from completely abandoning their relationship and dooming their children's lives in a broken home. And that's better for the family. This is why they have large families that are completely stable and the kids are doing well. And they're outperforming our kids that come from these single parent broken homes where the mom's always at work, no one's watching the kid, they get into drugs, they get into alcohol, they get into crazy shit on the streets, and they're already emotionally damaged by the time they're 18. Their potential is gone. Meanwhile, these kids are getting STEM degrees and just leapfrogging everybody else because arranged marriages in this setup works. And there's always going to be people that are like, oh my God, arranged marriages, that seems like torture. Well, it's torture to get into a relationship with somebody you don't really know, you didn't really vet properly because you were a little horn toad. They're like, oh yeah, but there's so many abusive relationships. Well, who can tell you whose partner is going to be more abusive? You or your father looking out for you, your mother looking out for you, your family looking out for you. They have a vested interest in this succeeding. You mean multiple people can't spot red flags and issues with your potential problem better than you, yourself, that has love blinders on? Come on, man. There's a reason this system works and it's far superior.
It doesn't persist for decades and decades. And some people it does, but it usually doesn't. And that tends to wane after about 3 to 5 years, somewhere in that area. And that's kind of consistent with, that developmental trajectory. People fall in love, they have kids, the kid is a little bit old enough now. Past that point, people are going to be a little bit more willing to move on. But of course, then there's committed love and all of these other facets of love where people still maintain really strong bonds, almost as a friendship in a relationship. But then that comes to a point, 15 years down the line, people might think, okay, I'm with a partner, I'm very committed to them. We're like best friends. We have a lot going there. But at the same time, that passionate love is missing. They want something else in addition to that. And so they're kind of faced with that choice or decision. Do they just continue in that relationship, or do they kind of move on and restart the process, so to speak? And there's not a good solution or a good answer there as far as like prescriptive, what should people do? And that's, of course, where all of these beliefs like religion and things come into play that tell people like, you should do this, you should do that. And I think even when people fall out of that passionate love, even if they have a bad relationship, breakups are still often really, really hard for them. So it makes a lot of sense that, norms would emerge that say like, just stay together forever. It avoids a lot of problems, even, if the relationship is not ideal in that sense.
Yeah, it's interesting, man. I don't know. I wonder what a different kind of religion would have been that said marriages are supposed to stay together for 10 years. And then at that point, there's some weird ceremony where you have to prove that you still care about each other enough, and both partners has to do it independently in some weird Rorschach lie detector test. And then you come.
None of that's needed. We need to bring back influence of the family. That's what we need to bring back. The issue is it's two individuals coming together with their own selfish notions about what to expect from their partner in a relationship. And these people are not equipped to vet one another properly because they lack the guidance that used to be there, instilled by the extended family. This was the due diligence of the extended family. We've completely removed the extended family from this entire equation. And it's like, oh, yes, if you love him, it's great. But do you love him? But are you happy? But is she hot? Are her tits huge? Wow, she's got a fat ass. Like, this is why people are coming together and they wonder why the relationship doesn't last. The most superficial, stupid shit you could ever imagine. And we live in these broken environments here in the West where family is like far gone conclusion when it comes to acceptance of a relationship. It doesn't matter what my parents think. I don't give a shit as long as I like him. Who cares? No more getting the father's approval. No more getting the approval of the family. Approval. Approving. Getting vetted. And accepted, all gone. It's my fifis. I feel like she's the right one. I feel like this is my partner, my soulmate. This moronic, magical thinking shit. No more practicality. It's all feelings. And that is fleeting. And when the feelings go away, the relationship goes away. And people are surprised. Wow, you built an entire relationship on how you felt. And when those feelings go away, you bail. Shocker to fucking nobody. We already have examples of successful systems and why they worked so well. Why do we insist modern progression necessitates progress? Period. It makes no sense. Just because we are advancing doesn't mean we're making positive improvements to the system we have. We may be going in the wrong direction. Maybe you need to have a few steps backward and try again. I don't know, dude. Am I like ass backwards? Do I not see that the current framework we have for relationships today are complete shit? Do we not see that the failure rates, that the childlessness rate, the amount of people reporting how unhappy they are, the spike in loneliness, the cat moms, dog moms, all this stuff meant to cope with the fact that you don't have a successful family. I mean, am I the only one seeing this as an issue? Am I the crazy one here? I don't know. That I'm even mentioning things like arranged marriages and involving the family and vetting your future partner. Is that ass backwards? Or is the world making me think I'm insane? Because when I'm looking at friends whose relationships are successful and whose aren't, it's always the ones that are the most traditionally minded. They don't have social media or use it very sparingly. They don't hang out with the opposite sex ever unless the partner is present and it's a couples thing. Some are church going, some aren't. They're a lot more private. Their affairs are kept private. They don't talk bad about their partners. They value family and spending time with their extended family far beyond anything online. Those are the ones that are working. Some of them, I have friends that are Indian and that have done the arranged marriage thing and are happily married. Yet most of my American friends either divorced, are failing, constantly replacing girls, or women crying about not being able to retain a man. Nobody's happy. Whenever things get hard, they bail and try again. Oh, let me swipe on another one. Maybe this one doesn't have these problems. Oh, look at that. Problems again in 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, doesn't matter. Oh, let me swipe on another one. Dude, perpetual failing over and over again. Nobody's happy. Yet they embody all the new age thinking. They're addicted to social media, attention from other people, constantly all these progressive leftist ideals of like men and women can be friends. And all the other stuff that comes along with that. I don't even need to get into it. Am I insane? I don't know, bro. Feels insane. Where are the traditionally minded people at? Let me know what you guys think.